You want to start? I will take my
Sweet.
screen off.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. So we're going to talk nerdy stuff, two things that I'm passionate about, music and computer science. So let's get started. Okay, so I've posted in the chat the session presentation, which is being displayed right now, and then the landing page on the website. I just got an error. Cool, critical error, shutting down the program. All right. So here's the plan. So first, we're going to just very quickly, I'm going to give you some background about myself. Then we're going to explore some hardware practices related to the intersections of popular musicianship and computer science. Then we'll explore some software practices, and we'll kind of discuss some of the potential implications and considerations. And then there's a lot of resources to learn more. What I would really like is discussion throughout. So if you have questions, post them in the chat. If you'd like to come on via audio and video, then Crystal will approve you, and then I'll be able to actually engage in a conversation with you through audio. And then at the end, there's time dedicated to more questions. So if you want to save it to the end, that's fine. If you want to ask a question throughout, that's also fine. Okay, so in the presentation itself, it takes you to a direct link to the landing page that I already posted in the chat. And another way that you can find these resources is just going to my website, which has nothing for sale, presentations tab, and then just click on the one that I think is at the top, and it's titled for this session. Okay, so very quickly, who am I? So I've worked with every grade, kindergarten through graduate. I've worked with a variety of music classes in general music, band, drumline, percussion, music technology, etc. But I've also done coding, computer science, and makerspace classes. So that was when I was in the classroom. For the last 3 years, I've been working at Boot Up PD, which is a nonprofit. And so I'm the director of education and research, and I create 100% free resources and kind of oversee our professional development and research initiatives. If you are interested in my background and want to see my qualifications and whatnot, there's a link to my CV, which you can check out there. And then I can actually post that in the chat to make your lives a little bit easier if that is of interest to you. So we're going to talk about hardware practices, and I'm going to provide some examples. Now, you'll see I've got a bunch of tabs open. So I've already preloaded, so hopefully, fingers crossed, everything works good. So the first one is a video that hardware practice that is about circuit bending sounds and music. So let's hear what that sounds like. Okay, so a child's toy working normally. This knob, potentiometer, has been added. So we're changing the voltage, which is making it slow down. If you change it in the other direction, it's making it speed up. This person has also added in a switch. You can add in different buttons, etc. So I'm going to turn this down just a little bit. Okay, so what's going on here? So the person basically took the toy apart and took a wire and connected one end to a metal part on the insides of it, on the guts of the circuit board, and then just touched another part and just tried to see where it made a sound, or when pressing a button, it changed the sound in some way. So this practice is called circuit bending, and I've got some resources on my website that point directly to Reed Gosela's description of how to do circuit bending practices. And this is something that you can actually do as long as you are using rated stuff and nothing that plugs into a wall, because then you can get into all sorts of electrical issues. Basic premise of circuit bending and this kind of hardware practice is it's more around experimentation with. So this one music example, but it's not always about making music. making some interesting sounds that you can then record and then use those sound samples in some kind of like a music production, like in GarageBand or Ableton Live or Pro Tools or whatever. You basically sequence them together to create some kind of a piece of music. Okay, so the next one. So modifying electronic hardware. So this one is a beautiful piece. This person's using a loop pedal, which starts there. So it's making it so that they can kind of layer in different sounds and music. And so everything you're hearing, this person is creating live. And you'll notice down here at the bottom of the screen, this is a Commodore 64, I believe, keyboard, but it's set up where the keys are set up like 2 rows of piano keys. So we have the white keys and then the black keys. So like there's our F sharp, our G sharp, our B flat or A sharp, C sharp, D sharp, etc. This is also being used on a modified Game Boy. So added in some different lighting, added in these audio ports right here that made it so that they could record the audio. So all of these hardware modifications that we are looking at in terms of how he's playing the Game Boy right now are all music-related hardware modifications. There's another view of the audio ports. There's his loop station or pedal. So if you are a music educator or working with a music educator, this kind of example is a great way of showing how you can augment your musical abilities by augmenting hardware. So the next one, which is just titled Augmenting Hardware. So this is a typewriter. And so the person modified the typewriter, so a device that was not originally capable of making music, and made it so that when pressed different keys, it would send different MIDI notes to a computer and allowed him to play this. That's what it sounds like, but sending the MIDI notes that plays this. This is a process, by the way, of something called finger drumming. So as a percussionist, instead of using your wrists to play or your arms or your feet, it's using your fingers to play some kind of literal keyboard or a MIDI keyboard, or in this case, a typewriter to make music. And that was being sent to a device like Ableton Live, or software that allowed it to basically perform all that live. Okay, so now the next one, instead of just modifying devices, one of the things that you can do on the intersections of popular musicianship and computer science is actually building or designing devices. So a very simple one, this is a short video by Eric Rosenbaum, who is one of the co-creators of the Makey Makey. So this is from Scratch Day at MIT. So these are all like Lego devices that kids have created. So play a drum. Okay, so that's a very simple example of like a little device that you can create using robotics. Now, the next one, is the link where it says or complex electronic devices, it takes you to this video, which I'm going to narrate over a little bit, but Onyx does a good job explaining what's going on here. And go. And go.
I wanted to show you the instrument that I designed to do the music that I create. My music is called beat jazz, and this is my beat jazz controller.
So custom controller.
It's a three-way wireless network built on open source software, running an open source operating system, and I use it to create a style that's completely improvised using nothing but synthesizers and these. I needed a controller that allowed me to improvise in multiple dimensions. So I created a controller that's based on saxophone fingerings, but has accelerometers that allow me to control multiple different effects and parameters at once using different key commands. So
I'm going to pause that real quick. So the way I conceive this as like somebody with a background in music education, this is basically saxophone 2.0 or like even 3.0. So it's taking the saxophone fingerings, using the what was previously a MIDI device where you'd blow into basically an electronic version of a wind controller, and making so that you could use that to play with your mouth, but also using your fingers and your positions with the accelerometers and even pressure sensitive keys and whatnot to now create music, and what he was saying with multiple dimensions. So I'm going to continue playing this so you can kind of hear more of his thought processes and what's going on. Now, again, this is an extreme example of some of the things that you can do with music and computer science.
I'm able to create everything live and have it with the sound like a DJ set.
So everything you're hearing is creating live, looping stuff, changing the effects.
So those are force sensing resistors, so they measure how hard I press, so I use them as keys.
All right, and what's on the back side?
The joystick here is to control part looper, part effects. Here is for octaves, and the top one is multi-function. It controls my volume, it controls looper position, those types of things.
Now, Onyx actually has, I think, multiple
Each
TED Talks.
unit has its own radio that communicates with its own radio at my computer, so I don't have any
That's the code.
bottlenecks in data or speed.
So in his TED Talks and some of his other videos, he talks about this more and shows you the back end and the development from where it started.
I saw you use your iPhone.
I created this as a feedback so that I could see what's going on with my system.
Okay, so I'm going to pause it here. I highly recommend watching the rest of this. It's pretty cool. And he actually plays pretty good rendition of a Michael Jackson song. Okay, so the last thing on the hardware practices or examples that's in here is a link, and it directs you to one of the appendices in my dissertation. So this has a bunch of visuals that can kind of give you an idea of how musicians modified Game Boys and other computer and video game hardware to do something different. So here are some aesthetic mods. So it's just like improving the way it looks and customizing it to be more of what they want through laser engraving, painting, dyeing, all sorts of stuff, adding in LEDs, which actually and backlighting, which makes it easier to perform in dark venues. But then there's also functional mods, which are towards the bottom here, that improve the audio in some way. So adding in these audio ports and adding in the potentiometers and the buttons or levers allowed it so that you can control the clock speed. So you can change the pitch by turning the knob. And all sorts of stuff. So if you skim through these, there's some quite entertaining, like Simon Cowell modifications that people have done, and some weird stuff like making a vaporizer out of a Wii remote. There's a bunch of interesting stuff in there. And if you read my chapter 4, in particular, it kind of unpacks more of these hardware practices in relation to music making and learning and whatnot. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to paste this link in the chat to a playlist, and we're going to spend a few minutes taking a look at some of these playlists and when the videos in there. And what I want you to do is think of what computer science practices and concepts are evident in these videos, and also think through what music related practices and concepts are also evident in these videos. Then if you'd like to paste some of those in the chat or come on the screen and actually chat with me about it, cool. But I'm going to set a timer for a few minutes, and then we will resume with software practices after that. So again, the playlist is linked there or linked in the chat. One of the things I'd recommend when looking at this playlist and upcoming playlists is just kind of skip around a little bit. There's a wide range of interesting things that people are interacting with. The Furby organ. Yeah, that thing sounds like a nightmare. And yes, thank you, Crystal. Double click on it to actually enlarge the presentation. And if you're curious what's going on in the Billie Eilish, the bad guy, what they're doing is like sending different voltages to make it so that the devices vibrate at different frequencies, which then causes it to create those different pitches. So that's an interesting video. Little Talks guitar cover. Yeah, there's some really cool videos in this playlist. Yes. Circuit bending creates some interesting sounds. Some are fascinating, others are definitely scary. About 2.5 minutes left. The doll is definitely creepy. I agree. That person posts a bunch of interesting circuit bending examples. And he likes to make them look funny. Thank you. By the way, if you're looking at the Makey one, the thumbnail, that is conductive paint. And you could even put like little like brass tacks like in different parts. And then so when you move your hand over the painting, it'll trigger different soundscapes. Cynthia, yeah, I agree. The bagpipe is definitely very cool. So again, while watching these, think through what computer science practices and concepts are evident, and then what are some music-related practices and concepts that might also be evident in this. And we can chat about all this at the end if you'd like, because we're going to do the same thing with a software playlist that I created. Daniel, into Ableton, what I'd recommend is looking at some of the Max for Live patches. So Max for Live makes it so that you can do all sorts of stuff in terms of converting things into MIDI. but also depending on the MIDI controller or the microcontroller that you're using, it can automatically do some MIDI for you. So like there's some teensy stuff that can be used. There's also some like pre-made Arduino patches that allow you to do that as well, or programs rather. All right, and 5 minutes is up. All right, so I'm gonna go move on to the software stuff. And so we're gonna kind of unpack and just explore some of the software practices that are kind of interested in the intersections of popular musicianship and computer science. I think I'd like to use a different DAW. Yeah. I personally love Ableton Live, Daniel. This is my absolute favorite DAW. And the reason why is because it can do the producing and whatnot, but you can also perform live, whether it's using a MIDI controller or even your keyboard or like a makey or whatever. So that's my favorite. I know GarageBand has some options for that now. And then Bitwig also has some abilities to perform live, but the best one, in my opinion, is Ableton for the live stuff. But other DAWs are also great for all the producing and composing. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the first software example. So creating and modifying retro music software. So here's an example of Africa. This is running on a Game Boy. This is the Game Boy screen. And this is the interface that you use to code everything that you are hearing right now. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. So again, this is all running on a Game Boy. And this software was developed by people within the chiptune community. So this software did not exist until people were like, you know what? I really want to be able to make music on my Game Boy. So they literally wrote software for the device. And because of that, we get Africa. I don't want to cut it off mid-phrase, sorry. Yes, Conrad, definitely dig out your Game Boy. There's so many cool things you can do with it. Check out my dissertation for tons of examples of it. It's one of the most popular instruments. And it's because of stuff like this. By the way, this software is called LSDJ, which stands for Little Sound DJ. So if you're interested in actually going into that, sorry, cut it off at a bad point. If you're interested in diving into it, Little Sound DJ, LSDJ, that's the name of this particular software that was created by community members who just wanted to make music with their Game Boys. Okay, so the next link on here, so using graphical programming languages. So the thing that I just showed was using columns and text and whatnot to create the music. There are graphical programming languages like Max, formerly known as Max MSP. So for example, this is what a metronome looks like in Max MSP. So right now it's going at 120 beats per minute, and it is in 4. Now, it can do more complicated stuff than just a metronome. So for example, this was a program that I developed that randomly simulates an environment. So it sounds like a soundscape that you're walking through a forest where you hear like a river off on the side, and like every time you do it is completely different. Like crickets will move around, some birds will fly overhead, etc. So this is what the code looked like. And a lot of these are like different functions. When you click on it, it dives a little bit deeper into it. Now, another example of some of the graphical stuff that you can do, this was a loop station that I was working on. And so this is basically all of the code. So what this allowed you to do was kind of like in the second video that I showed with the guitarist and the Game Boy, is to loop your own music. And this had up to 4 tracks that you could loop. So when you ran this program, it allowed you to kind of like layer on 4 different loops that were all quantized to the metronome. So which means that when you are having the metronome go, and you say, I want to start the loop on the downbeat in 4 beats, then it'll wait until the 4th beat, and then boom, it goes right into it. So it makes it so that you don't have to like be perfect with your timing. So again, that's what the code looks like. It's a little weird looking, but it makes sense once you actually dive into it. Okay, so in addition to kind of like creating your own music software, you can actually compose with code. So this example that I'm going to show you links to Sonic Pi, the examples page. So this simple code, zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. Right here, when you run it, it sounds like this. Okay, so it's random, the amount of time that it waits between playing the next sound. It's also randomizing the rate, so rate random. So it's changing the pitch of it. So it makes it this like haunted quality to it. Now, if you scroll through here, there are several more examples that you can take a look at. So for example, the Tron bikes. This is sonicpi.net. Here, I'll paste it in the chat, make it easy for you. And what I'd recommend doing is just take a couple minutes to like look at the code, try and figure out what do you think is this going to sound like just by looking at this, and then actually listen to it and go, oh, okay, this is what it sounds like. So there's a lot of really cool examples in here, which we'll explore in more depth in a few minutes. Okay, so the next one that's on here, creating trap with code. So this video is somebody who is using Sonic Pi, the thing that I was just demonstrating, and they are creating trap music with it. So let's hear what that sounds like. Everything you're hearing is composed all within this software. All with code, specifically the language Ruby. Yeah, Sarah, I think my friend Bob Irving was doing the Sonic Pi session, so I'd highly recommend checking that out. Okay, so that's what trap sounds like writing it in code, or at least what it can sound like. So if you watch this particular person, he has a ton of videos, not only showing like examples of what this sounds like, but also walkthroughs of how to create different things in Sonic Pi. Okay, so that's composing. Now, you can also perform with code. And so I'm going to skip around in this video. And this video starts off with just typing out what's going to happen and then running it. And so this is what we hear. Okay, so now changing the parameters. So it sounds a little bit different. Okay, adding in more parameters, just ran that code. Sounds a little bit different, etc. So I'm going to skip ahead because this is almost an hour-long performance. So about 5 minutes into it, it sounds like this. Again, this is all live coding, and this is the results we get. So now I'm going to skip ahead to 23 minutes into it. Okay, chaotic moment. Skipping again. And then skipping one more time. Again, everything that you hear in each one of these sections that I'm skipping to is all within this code that's going on right here. And one of the cool things about performing live with code is a lot of times they'll display their screen in back when we could do live venues and whatnot, but online through virtual meetups and whatnot. So I'd recommend like actually watching several minutes of like videos like these to kind of see what's going on and look at the code that's going and causing this. Now, this is a different program than Sonic Pi, and the description and stuff, I believe talks about it. I forget the name of this one. I didn't write it down. Sorry, I'm a bad presenter. Cool. Okay, so now what we're going to do, just like before, is we're going to take a few minutes and explore this playlist or explore the Sonic Pi examples that are here. I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes. And I want you to think through what computer science practices and concepts are evident in it, and what are the music-related practices and concepts that are evident within this playlist or the Sonic Pi examples. And if you have questions or comments, post them in the chat or feel free to join me. Joel, what kind of computer is it? Dog just opened the door. Is it Apple? Is it Windows? Is it Linux? Okay. My personal favorite is Ableton. And the reason why I like Ableton is because it allows you to not only compose and produce, but to also perform with it, which integrates so well with so many different MIDI devices, like a Launchpad, which is just like this grid of keys that you can just like finger drum, kind of like the typewriter example earlier. So I personally recommend Ableton, and you can do a free trial for 30 days. And there's also an Ableton Lite, which allows you to, I think it's like $99 or something, and you can compose and create probably the kind of music that you'd want to do with for that podcast. If you're using a Mac, what I recommend is just starting with something like GarageBand because it's free, and then going from there. But personally, my favorite is Ableton. And it's specifically because it can do both live and pre-composed stuff. And you can do both simultaneously. Agree. Ableton is not cheap at all. And there is an educational discount, and you can actually use the educational discount with like holidays and whatnot. So Memorial Day, it usually goes on sale, and you get the educational discount, so you can get it for like half the price. Yeah, let me post a link to Ableton. There's a link to it. And one of the other reasons why I love Ableton is because it integrates with Max, which Max is that graphical programming language that I was talking about earlier. So it makes it so that you can not only use Ableton as a digital audio workspace, or workstation, but you can also compose your own add-ons essentially to it using code. Okay, so Lynn, in terms of middle schoolers, I actually have used Ableton with middle schoolers. It depends on how you teach it to them. But generally speaking, GarageBand is the one to go with. There's also SoundPlant, which is virtual. So let me post a link to that. Oh, sorry, not SoundPlant. SoundPlant is something different. Sound. So Soundtrap is kind of like GarageBand, but virtual. So it allows you to compose music collaboratively online. So I'd recommend starting there. Doesn't really allow, unless they've added an update, doesn't allow you to do things live, but it does allow, especially now with COVID, kids to go online and create their own music. There's also just a ton of apps that people use for like matrices for like, you just click on the different squares and then it sequences together like drum beats and melodies and things like that. Kids really liked using that in the classes. Okay, so we have 20 seconds left. Checking out these playlists. There are several TED Talks on that playlist that kind of unpack and demonstrate this more. We don't have time in 45 minutes to go through even close to all the stuff. Huh. I haven't tried Waveform Free. I'll have to check that out. Cool. Yeah, so Logic Studio is basically like GarageBand Plus. So it's the big kid version of it. So what a lot of the pros use. Okay, so now I actually want to talk about some of the potential implications and considerations for this. So as an example of what are some of the interconnected practices, the link at the top, it links to my dissertation, which these were the main categories or like findings that I found. So there were composition practices evident. There were performance practices, maker practices, which were like the hardware practices, coding practices, entrepreneurial practices, visual art practices, and community practices. So all of these things were interconnected in that if somebody wanted to compose and perform music, they needed to modify their device in order to make it so that the audio sounded better, or make it so they can control the audio with the potentiometers and things like that. And then they needed to actually compose software for it. So they needed to code programs in order to actually run it on the devices that they're modifying. So these all kind of work together in an interconnected way. And I think this could also work in school settings if we were to actually engage in collaborative efforts, which we'll talk about. So as another example of like, what does this look like as a quick demonstration? So this is a Guitari. So it's a guitar version of an Atari.
So this is the Atari 2600 games console from the 70s. It used to take these big cartridges that had slot in the top, and you could play some pretty amazing games. But generally most games only had simple sound effects, and the games that did have music just kept it simple. So what I decided to do with it is try to actually push some music out of the device, and got myself an EEPROM programmer, wrote a bit of software to convert everything in a way where I could write music easily for it. And with these little daughter boards, it allows me to simply plug in the top, and you can see there I have my chip tune in my machine, hence the Guitari 2600. And this has everything I need on it to rock out. It has my EQ pedal, so I can add lots of 50 hertz to explode bass through subwoofers. The flange pedal, I have the hold ability to be able to hold notes and do whammy holds and things like that. And if I want to switch between tracks, I can power on and off and select a new track. And awesome fun to play. And I took it to Japan, and this is what happened.
Okay, so I'm going to pause here. You can check out the rest of the video. So the point of this is to show that the interconnected practices, so modifying the devices, building and manufacturing devices that converted the signals into MIDI data, coding the software that allowed it to then compose with it, and then also being able to perform with it live in a venue like this. So this is what I'm trying to demonstrate, is that these practices can all be interconnected, or we can continue to silo them into different classes like we typically do in education. Okay, so here are some general considerations after having explored this for several years and whatnot, is whose standards are you going to explore with this? Now, if you were to take a look at the National Core Arts Standards, there are a ton of music-related standards that are about composing, performing, etc., but they don't mention anything about coding and modifying hardware and things like that. However, if you look at CSTA standards, they do have that. So what I'd recommend is, if you're going to go into something like this, is try and combine standards from both the National Core Arts Standards and from CSTA's national standards. Now, another thing that I recommend is SAMR. So asking the question, where does this fit in SAMR? And if you click on the link, it tells you more information. So SAMR is an acronym for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. So substitution and augmentation. Thank you, Crystal. Some examples would be like using block-based programming to compose music instead of another form of notation. So instead of like Western staff notation, moving it on that, why don't you use something like on the right, like Scratch? So modification might be circuit bending a musical device to do something new. And then a redefinition might be performing live music with a newly created device that was also programmed. So like that example with Citrix that I just played on the screen. Okay, so the next one, new affordances comes with new constraints. So blocks, for example, are very easy to use, but they often limit the kind of musical and CS possibilities that you can create. There's a paper by Alex Ruthman that's cited in some of the publications that I'll share that kind of unpacks that a bit more. Another thing is that coding can enable practices that can't be done. So as an affordance, here's an example that I wrote in Sonic Pi. So this code right here, it randomly generates an infinite drum set, groove, and beat. So you can check out the code in my website that shows that. It makes you so that you can make music in new ways that you could not do previously. And then one of the things you also need to consider is how much time are you spending on computer science and how much are you spending on music making? And the reason why that is important is because you need to like balance between the two. When you are engaging with music educators, I'd recommend talking about SAMR and thinking through that. If they are hesitant music educators, as many of them will be, send them my way. So there's a contact me button on my website. And I can help convince them because I do have a PhD in music education. I have taught music education courses. So I can show them there is a lot of value and benefit in doing this thing. I also recommend that you start small. So start with just the very basics like, hey, let's just try doing this one little project and then kind of growing from there. And if you are going to collaborate, what I'd recommend is actually making sure that you're utilizing your strengths. So you be the person who's really knowledgeable on CS and coding, and then have the music educator be really knowledgeable on the music side of things and kind of combine your knowledges and share what you're learning through these understandings. Now, at the bottom of this, there's a bunch more resources that you can look into. So at the bottom of the presentation, including some publications, and there's some more publications that I've written that are coming out soon. And just a hint that you can actually contact a lot of authors to ask for free versions of their publication. Hint, hint. So when these things come out, you know what to do. And the last thing is there's a podcast that I host that kind of unpacks more CS related stuff. So if you enjoyed this, there's an evaluation, and if you didn't enjoy it, fill it out as well. Let me know how I can improve it. But I want to continue this conversation, so feel free to reach out to me. Contact me button on my website, or hit me up in the Boot Up booth. I'll be there in the exhibitor hall, or just hit the people button and talk to me there. But I really appreciate everyone attending and everyone who's watching the recording after the fact. Thanks for posting that in there, Jake. So again, the name of this was Intersections of Popular Musicianship and Computer Science. Thanks, Sean. And feel free to ask questions in the chat. I can stick around for a few more minutes in here. Thank you. Oh, cool. Thanks for posting the title on there. And actually, easier, I'll put it up on the screen. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, Cynthia, seriously, do reach out to me. I've had many CS educators and music educators reach out to me to kind of ask specifically about, well, how do I do this? Especially when it comes to talking to music educators. Some of them are very resistant. They think that the only real instrument is a physical instrument that has like a reed and is, I don't know, whatever. I disagree. And because I have that background in music education, I can talk to them in a way that can make me look like the bad guy that's telling them they're wrong. You're welcome. Thank you. Yeah, Laura, no, seriously, there's a lot of discussion in the music education community about like what is considered to be real music, and anything that is music technology related, people freak out about. So I'm happy to talk to them in a polite way that doesn't offend them. But yeah. You're welcome, Phil. Thank you. Yeah. Diana, contact me if any of them have questions about this. Like showing the makey examples, like from the playlist. Actually, I'll just paste it to make it easier for you. Nope, not that one. So the makey examples that are in here, you can use with Scratch, and just some very simple ways of like, hey, let's make some interactive art. Let's make some interactive, a ladder, like whatever, like and make it so it makes music. So a lot of cool stuff that you can do. Yeah, Laura, I totally get that. I know what that's like. Having like been in the music ed realm and then like switching 100% over to computer science and coding and whatnot, it is a little weird. Like they will sometimes write you off or dismiss you and go, well, what do you know? It's like, well, I mean, I do have a doctorate in that thing, so I do know some stuff. At least one would hope. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me, and I can help with that conversation if they're resistant to you. Just because there's this weird, like, you're not one of us anymore kind of things, which I don't understand. Yeah. Okay. So Phil, I totally agree with you on that. One of the ways that I like to engage in those conversations is how to augment the current abilities. So an easy example of that is like a loop station. So for myself as a percussionist, like I love watching other videos of people who are making music with percussion who use the loop station to make it so that they can create an ensemble of themselves. Or maybe they're even doing like the multi-boxing, recording themselves in YouTube and kind of like piecing those all together to create something. So like I created a stop motion version of Tetris where I was playing marimba. And so there was like 3 versions of me all playing the song together. So it allowed me to make music in ways that I could not do without that technology. So that's the way that I like to do an entry point with a bunch of teachers. Another thing that I like to do, let me show you a video. Launchpad. Sorry, it's going to take me a minute. There's a lot of videos of this, but I want to find the right one. Nope, not that one. Okay, I think it's this one. So I like to show videos of stuff like this, where it's taking classical music like Flight of the Bumblebee and performing it on an instrument that a lot of music educators like freak out about and are like, I don't think that's an instrument. And then when you play a video like this, it's like, yeah, but isn't this the kind of music that you want kids to be able to play? Is there not virtuosity demonstrated through this? So there's actually a playlist that I have, and sorry, let me pull it up. That is on digital and hybrid musicianship, and it is shared on my channel, which I will post it in the chat here. So this playlist has a ton of examples of ways that you could potentially help music educators understand that this is musicianship. So if you scroll like further down in particular, there's well over 100 videos on here, but there's like examples of people performing with instruments that are not typically considered to be instruments, or like using loop pedals or things like that for like both of these videos, etc. But there's tons of really cool ways that people are making music that demonstrate virtuosity that music educators who use the physical acoustic instruments really value. And to be able to look at this and go, isn't this also music making and learning? And that is what I typically recommend as a starting point. I rambled too long. Let me read the comments. Yeah, Crystal, good point. If you want to chat with me, we can do that. All right, we got another percussionist. Closet drummer. Yeah, my wife and I are both percussionists. It works out really well. So We have 3 drum sets, a marimba, all sorts of stuff. So we can make music together and not annoy each other because we're both drummers. Here's another video that I recommend as an example. I think it was Phil that asked about this. No, not whatever that is. I will skip you in a moment. Skip. Okay, here's the video. Everything you're about to see, he's performing live, triggering live, all vocal. So you can send this to your choir folks. So processing the voice, looping the voice, triggering some pre-recorded vocal samples to get this. Oh, thanks, Crystal. Nice to meet you as well.
For a lifetime, 1,000 endings.
So again, allowing you to do something you could not do without the technology. That is like the best way to reach music educators who are hesitant about music technology in particular.
You don't stop running, 'cause
Cool. Yeah. Encourage them to do this. Have them reach out to me. I can connect them with a lot of people who are doing some cool things like this. So, yeah, I'll stop it there. I recommend watching the rest of this. I actually like it better than the original. It's a good freeze frame. I see there's still 9 other people in the chat. If you have any other questions, please let me know. You can jump on the screen as well. Cool. Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for attending, Phil. And I look forward to reaching out to you or having you reach out to me. All right. Any last takers? I'll leave the session. Thanks, everyone.